And I want to tell you, both of you did just a great job on your homework. And we're going to use that kind of as the closing for today. So, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was very made me feel real good that the 9 weeks we've spent, you guys have done some really good stuff. So, thank you. So today we're going to do some new content, some refresher content, and we're going to focus on kind of the financial resources required and how we measure in those spaces, so that we can not just understand the process and the concept, but we can go to the financial metrics. And whatever we talk about today is equally applicable for Avcom and all your clients, so that the logic works both for you and for your clients. So that's why there's a lot of power in this. So before I get started, any questions you have from last week or before we start today?
No, not for me.
Not for me.
Okay, good. So when we think about measuring the revenue process, there's a recognition that what we're really measuring is just like in a manufacturing environment. We're measuring the flow that goes through your revenue process, and we're measuring the value of the flow over time. So too often people want to measure just one component. You know, marketing wants to measure, well, we got 20 clicks today. Well, 20 clicks are nice as long as they move from being a raw material condition, actually go to the next step, which is where the person might raise their hand and say, let's have a conversation. If the clicks don't go anywhere, then we have to ask ourselves, what can we do that will get 20 people who actually take the next step? Because we really have to put a whole series of steps together, and then we have to be able to put those together over and over and over again over time. And in your case, as in almost all business cases, we're doing that for multiple offers that are traveling this roadmap. So we're really trying to measure for each offer, whether it's safety or whether it's space or whether it's de-icing, we're trying to measure each of those offers moving across the process. So that's why this becomes so important, that no one activity only has one possible value. For example, you know, one of the well, let me jump over here a second. This I showed you a couple of weeks ago, and I'll send you this in a spreadsheet so that you can have it if you want it. It's really the ability to measure for each offer your flow, your pipeline, your forecast. And these are being measured based on behavioral outcomes of potential customers moving across this path. So Paula, as you're doing space, you're thinking about how many people have raised their hand. They seem to be an ideal client in our niche who has the problem we solve. Some of them have raised their hand and moved into a joint statement of work process, and some of them are now looking at contracts, and then we're looking at how long does it take to deliver the work. It's that whole measurement from end to end that determines your growth, your scale, and your ultimate financial success. if we only move one deal through a year, that's not going to give you as big a return as if we move 5 deals. And as a team, one of the things you guys will have to decide is, since you have a set number of humans delivering the service and doing all the work going through this, what's our focus? Is our focus on space, or is it on security, or is it on baggage, or is it on de-icing? And how much time do we want to spend to each one? And we're going to talk about that whole concept in a few minutes. But it makes your measurement, you can do it, but you have to be disciplined about it. Because you can't just say, well, this is working because it's working for de-icing. It has to be intentionally working for de-icing. So let's step back now and think about why the bell curve matters when it comes to the financial part of the business. And so as you look at this, what's the first thing that strikes you? Why does this have an impact on your profitability or your client's profitability?
So people who want to go with pricing and who are the laggards, in this case, right in quadrant 5, are not going to pay you enough because they don't value what you're giving them, and they don't understand the value of the problem that we've solved for them.
Absolutely. What else? There's another piece to that as well. And it really deals with flow. So think about the bell curve, and particularly the right side, Sanjay. And what's the difference on the flow part of that as well?
I don't understand. Ask me the question again.
Okay. Will you have more or less competition on the right side?
Oh, yes, definitely. And very true. We're definitely going to have far more competition. So you are swimming against, a shoal of fish. So
exactly. And so when you think about your resources, and on the right side, you may, it wouldn't be unusual to compete against 5 to 10 different companies in something over in track 5. And the math is, if you're really competing against 10 companies, most of the time you win 1 out of 10 if all things are fairly similar. So you're investing a lot of resource to go through find the opportunity, make sure they have you on the bidders list, make sure you get to the bidders conference, make sure that you put the proposal together, make sure it's submitted on time inside all of the requirements for the proposal. And so you have a lot of resource to invest to get a fairly low margin, low probability of win type deal. So, as we think about the bell curve, one of the first things we think about is that first opportunity to win that first deal. Now, when we think about deals for the right side, after we've won them, one of the things we want our delivery organization to help us do is turn this deal into a long-term partnership. Do we think that deals on the right side frequently go into partnership?
No.
Almost never.
Yeah.
Because their mindset is everything's a transaction. And so when the first transaction's over, as far as they're concerned, the sheet's clean, it's brand new, we're going to the next one, and to win the next one, you've got to go through the same steps of finding the RFP, getting on the bidders list, getting the specifications for the bid, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to win 1 out of 10, and it's going to be low margin. So when you think about managing resources, and that's one of the things as you keep learning to apply revenue science, what you learn is that you can accomplish almost anything, but your limitation is your resource to go do it. Enough people, enough time, those are your limitations. And so when we look at opportunities, we really have to look at those and say, what's my resource commitment? And if I win, what's my outcome? And then what's the probability that I get through this process and win, and the margin's high or low? So we need to start thinking that way, because it's when we go back to the true north, that's one of the reasons we say no to things on the right side of the curve. Because financially, even if we win them in an unusual group, the return is small. And we don't get any future leverage. We don't create a partnership out of it. Probably we don't even get many referrals out of it, or we won't get a lot of reference out of it, because they don't think that way in track 4 and 5. Yeah, you did a good job. You delivered exactly what you were supposed to, and we paid you for it. That's all there is to this. So that's the first thing when we think about the bell curve, is just recognizing that on the right-hand side, we have the low margin. We are very competitive. We have to invest a fair amount of resource in order to get there. And that's probably, for a firm like yours, not a really good place to be. So what's the opposite? What's going on the right side that helps you make the decision where you want to invest?
You mean on the left side?
Yes, thank you. On the left side.
Yeah. So I think on the left side, we need to invest into finding that problem, which, now since I've been talking to you, that's all I think about. What is the problem solved? What is the problem solved? So finding what that problem solved is, and then start on that roadmap. Do I really want to talk to them? Because if I'm not solving their problem, they can come to me, and they can, even though they may be a left side organization, I can only deliver a right side product to them. So why bother?
That is so powerful. And yes, and what you said, that you've been thinking about the problem, and the kind of the metamorphosis that occurs when you do that is, all of a sudden the power of your thought leadership grows, because you're now thinking about that problem at a depth and at a total level that the customer's not thinking about. And so as you look at this problem, you see this extra value in the short term you can bring them, and the extra value they can receive over the long term. And they truly aren't thinking about that, because you're focused on how AFCOM can bring greater value short term and long term to them. So now you truly are bringing a brain piece to this that most of the time you have to educate them for. And so it's identifying that right buyer on that left side that wants to be educated, wants the value, wants to be the leader, wants to be differentiated, doesn't want an immediate short-term problem, because all they did is stick a finger in the hole of the dike. So your whole messaging, your whole approach becomes different. And once they accept you as that thought leader, they're not going to let you go.
Correct.
So part of what you're looking for is that long-term relationship based on the fact you're thinking about that problem in a way they haven't even thought about. Now, let's jump to the reality of moving through this roadmap. So as we're trying to find the suspects, investigate them, investigate us, they're qualifying you in, you're qualifying them in, and then we get to the joint statement of work. Let's take a look at some of the stuff that's actually measurable on our part. And the first thing to measure is language. When we're talking to what we think is that ideal buyer over here on the left side of the curve, listen to the conversations. If the conversations are about the problem, about business, about how do we make them better. And, you know, obviously, if we're making money with them, we're making ourselves better. But if that's the conversation, we can be quite confident we're in the right place. If the only thing in the conversation, sometimes we get overly, we think Tinkerbell's there, and we're going to get magic dust, and we're going to spread the dust on the customer because our offer is so wonderful that they're going to figure it out all of a sudden. If their language is about cost and price, not about the problem, what does that tell us?
It's not a long-term relationship.
And are they seeing the value you're bringing?
No.
And so if they don't see the value, then all of a sudden you will end up with a difference. Even if they like your solution, if they haven't understood the value, they're not likely to pay you for it. And so this is one of those places where if the conversation's not about the problem and the business benefits of solving it, they're not likely to pay us for it. And so that really, and you're a small company and cash flow's king, I get that. So one of the skills we need to get is to help people who want to talk about, whether they want to talk about price or cost, we need to see if they'll move to the problem. Because if they won't move to the problem, they're never going to pay us for it. And we're going to do the work. They won't even be a good reference because they didn't understand what we did. And so listening to the conversation is really important. And part of our skill, and you know, we've talked about revenue science as a science, but for example, medical science, the doctor who's going to do the surgery, in addition to understanding the surgery, has to have the skill of how to do it. Okay? So now we're talking about how you apply the science, and part of that is the skill to help people understand that the conversation, if it stays on cost or it stays on specifications, they're missing out because they're not understanding that you're about to bring them new value, new money, new cash. And if we can't get them to see that, they're missing out just like we are. Both sides of the equation are losing money. Now, one of the reasons this happens is we aren't thinking about who we're talking to. Now, you may find different descriptors fit for you, but in general, in most cases, there's somebody who's an economic buyer. They're the ones who can actually pick up the pen, sign the contract, and tell everybody this is what we're going to do. Now, in today's world, there's less of that than there was 20 years ago. Today, it is more likely to be all 5 of these mindsets, these approaches, come together in one room and talk about it. But recognize, even if they come together, each of them has they have a part of it that's more important to them than the other parts. So if I'm the economic buyer, what do I probably care most about?
Solving my problem.
Solving the problem and having the business be better off as a result of solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm an administrative buyer, and for our purposes, think of legal and purchasing, what are they thinking about?
What's the least amount of money I have to spend to get this problem fixed?
And
it's not my problem, it's somebody else's.
Exactly. And if it's the legal part, what are they thinking?
Same thing. What is the least amount of money I have to spend to legally remain within the limits of what I've been tasked with?
And they are also thinking the risk on the contract.
Yes, but just above the risk. That's it. You're not looking for,
Oh,
I've
absolutely.
got to build a Taj Mahal. I just need to build a room where I can store my grain or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And I want to make sure I can hold you accountable for delivery on time and warranty and, all those other kinds of things, because that's what contract people do.
Mhm.
Okay. So what's a user buyer likely thinking about?
How does it benefit me? Where is it going to make my life better? But where can I find the cheapest option and get exactly the same result? And what can I compromise on?
Mhm.
Yep. Uh, Technical buyer. Paula, what do you think the technical buyer is thinking about?
Uh, the technical buyer, maybe what is the, no, I'm not so sure. Technical.
Okay, think of technical as they could be an engineering arm, they could be a software arm, they could be even a financial arm if they're measuring the productivity or the value. They're people who get up in the morning and have a very disciplined, typically science or math based approach to whatever we're going to do. So, for example, if it were de-icing, I'm sure they have somebody who is an expert in de-icing and exactly what it takes to make sure the planes are safe before they're released for the runway. That would be a technical buyer in a de-icing scenario. So, what's their brain working on? How do we have to make them happy?
Uh, well, it's probably giving them what they want to solve, like whatever problem they have, but with probably the cheapest price they will be looking for, solving the same thing with the cheapest price.
Yeah, they may or may not be about the cheapest price. Often engineers are about the how cool is the technology, or I want to prove I've got the best de-icing in all of North America. But they're very detailed, and oftentimes they want to show you how smart they are.
Okay.
So if you were dealing with an architect, for example, who's working on a project for an airport, um, what would you think they would be caring about?
Uh, well, they would probably be caring about to follow like the latest uh, solutions that you can give, like the latest materials they can use, things like that.
Exactly, and it might be environmental related, or it might be about heating and air conditioning considerations, and so it's very technical.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's about low price and they want to show off they can help somebody get the lowest price. But oftentimes it's they're the ones who are going to validate your solution so that when the economic buyer says, I think I want to do this, they're going to turn to the technical buyer and say, will this work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
The application buyer in this example is intended to be, in effect, the project manager of whatever it is we're going to go do. They're the ones when the economic buyer and the team decide to go forward. Somebody turns to them and says, can you project manage this? Can you make sure that this solution is effectively installed and the specifications and the costs are met as we're designing the contract to say? So that if this is what it's going to cost, this is how many weeks it's going to take, these are the outcomes. Typically, they assign that outcome responsibility to someone particular, and that ends up being the application buyer. Now, as we look at this and we want to get contracts on the left-hand side, what does this tell us that we need to do?
What is this? What? Sorry.
Well, when you look at the 5 different mindsets, and in some cases this is 10 or 15 people, there can be 3 or 4 users involved. There can be, in some of your projects, there could be engineers, architects, there could be environmental people as technical buyers. You could have 3 or 4 different technical buyers. And then you have an application economic buyer. All these people are in this deal. What does that mean to us? What do we have to do in order to satisfy this bunch of people? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you also have sometimes political people in these deals. The Air Force or the airport boards, or some of those kinds of people involved. So what does that mean to us? How do we deal with that? Let me ask a question. Am I correct that in many of your opportunities you have at least this many people milling around in the deals?
Yeah.
Sanjay?
Yes, for sure. So to answer that question, I would say I really need to know what the needs are of these people, because the technical buyer in that group of 10, let's say, and particularly watching the video last night, let's say it's the 6.4 people who are decision makers. So choose the technical buyer and give him what he wants. Choose the sales guy and give him what he wants. Choose the CEO and give him what he wants. So our problem is not just what is the problem solved for an organization. It now becomes smaller pieces in what is the problem solved for this decision maker.
Amen.
So, Rick, I just want to say that my computer's frozen. I can't see anything.
We don't see you, we hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out and log in again.
Okay.
Because I've just got a blank screen, so I can't even see the thing. So I'm going to try. It won't even allow me to log out.
Go right ahead. Yep. We'll wait for you. We'll have another conversation until you get here.
Okay.
Paula, did you get to watch that video yesterday?
No, I didn't get to. I received. I was going to, but
Okay, that's all. That's okay. And if you get the chance, it's pretty.
I will, for sure.
It's pretty interesting. So while we're waiting for Sanjay to come back, in the work that we've done in the past, and now recognizing in your work, because so much of it deals with complex organizations, and I think the fact that you're part of the team is recognizing that, oh, Sanjay's back. You're muted, it looks like, Sanjay.
Yeah, and I now, every time the Norton is safe comes up, my screen freezes. So I just see blank, nothing else in it. So just like a white screen with everything gone off. So sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm smiling because I do everything I can not to have McAfee or Norton on my computers. They just cause me no end to problems. I use other security, but I don't use those.
Yeah, I know. This is Norton is Wayne's baby. He wanted it. I don't use Norton because I know the trouble that we have, even though it's effective. Anyway.
Yeah. So here's what to think about. And Sanjay, you were right on the target. If we take 2 of the things we've talked about in the last few weeks, and one of them is the concept of the offer, and the other one is the concept of the message. when we recognize that there are, and it really doesn't matter if there are 5 humans, 15 humans, or 1 human. If there's 1 human in the deal, that human has all 5 of these mindsets in their brain.
Mhm.
You know, if Wayne makes a decision, he often is the economic buyer, he's the application buyer, he's the technical buyer, he's the user buyer, and he's the administration buyer, okay? The 5 mindsets don't go away. You know, and so when we create an offer or we create a message, to ignore these mindsets is risky. And if you think about, I'm going to jump back up here. If you think about the message model and you think about those 5 mindsets, what we're trying to do is get all 5 of them awed and excited, or at least awed and not antagonistic. Then it's, can we make the whole group confident and comfortable? Confident and comfortable could take weeks, could take months. If you're doing a $500,000 consulting project, it may take 3 months to get to the deal. And you have to communicate to all 5 of those people during that process. And if I were competing with you and you had ignored one of these 5 mindsets, in the real world, all 5 of these mindsets can veto you. If a technical buyer says, you know, I know you guys like Paula, you liked her design, you liked what she said, I don't believe it works, and I'm the architect for the airport. You're at risk. Okay? And so if I were competitive to you, I'd get my technical buyer to veto you, and I'd be the last one standing, I'd win. Because if one of these 5 vetoes you, you're pretty much done. If legal says they won't adhere to our contract, we can't contract with them, you're done. So when you think about your offer, you remember the donut with all the elements in it? You want to recognize these 5 mindsets in those elements. So for the user, you want to have something that says to the user, this is easy, it's safe, it's fast, whatever it is that user is going to at least neutralize that user so that they don't veto you. You want that user to say, well, they aren't my first choice, but it looks pretty good. They're okay with that. So recognize in your offer and in your messaging, particularly in the messaging, when you get to the comfort and confidence level, because you can awe or wow the economic buyer, but the comfort and the confidence comes from the rest of the buyers. So when you think about building this roadmap, what you're really saying is, once we get everybody to recognize in this gold section, we know how to solve their problem. We know how to do this. And we move now to the, okay, we hear you, you know how to solve it, you've convinced us you bring things to the table nobody else brings. When you go to the scope of work piece, you're really saying, I need to involve those other mindsets. I need to make sure I hear what's critical to them and they understand we're not a threat. We're there to help them get their world better. And that's what that middle part of that process is. That's where the power of, and I almost hesitate to use the word selling because we're not in there trying to convince them. We're in there trying to build what we know into their world to make them better. And if we can't, that's one of the places we probably should think about walking away. Because if there's antagonists in there, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to be in a situation where you're trying to install something and you've got an antagonist. But that makes it, Sanjay, you have?
I've learned to deal with them.
Well, and to the extent that we can address it in the offer and in the scope of work and get that off the table when we talk about measuring flow, and that our real cost is how efficiently we can move an offer all the way through, and when we're done, we end up with a partner instead of a transaction. Eliminating the antagonist and getting them being on the same side of the table with them is powerful, and it's financially highly advantageous. So that's why the process is so important. And one of the coaching things I would have is, if we interviewed, let's say it is 5 humans or 6.4 or whatever the number is, let's just say it's 5. If there are 5 humans and you interview each of the 5 separately, what do you think the likelihood is you will hear the same story about the problem 5 times?
10%.
You're optimist. You might hear 10% of the problem the same all the time. But my coaching for you is, if you're there to solve a problem, all 5 of these buyer types or brain types are part of the problem. Get them in the same conversation at the same time. Why do you want to do that?
So my outlook in this, from what I've learned in the last 1 week, and I've been doing a lot of reading, is the messaging has to take these 5 people into consideration. And I have to send out a message to one person addressing the other 4. Because if his problem is solved, or if he thinks that it is workable, he pushes it on to someone else. But I don't have an opportunity to meet him till all 5 of them say, yeah, let's go with this guy. But my messaging has to be such that my offer addresses each and every problem that these people create. So, Paula, just to explain it, what we are doing with Abbotsford Airport, this project that I asked you to do, was we can go to this guy, Parm Sidhu, and say, hey, we can make your airport better. But when we said that we want to bring it up to the ACI and ASQ level, we are talking to his boss. This general manager is operational. He really doesn't care if an airport is part of the ASQ or not. It's not his KPI. But his boss, who's the CEO, it's his KPI. So when we build that offer, or when we will build this project that you're doing, we are addressing multiple people. Am I correct, Rick?
Sanjay, I love the way you said that. And I'm gonna make some assumptions. You correct me if I'm off, okay? What I heard you say is that the person that you're talking to is probably the application buyer. They're the ones who got to go do the work, and they don't care about the politics or any of that stuff. They care about, today, if this place doesn't work, I get yelled at. And so, but what you did, and I loved it, is you were going to say to the application buyer, I'm going to get you what you need, and you're going to make your boss a hero so that you become a hero because you made your boss a hero. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And so that's the power in looking at the 5 people or the 5 mindsets as your opportunity. Because when you are really solving the problem, And I also believe that what you were saying in there is you never gave up the fact you're here to solve the problem. And the problem not only benefits the application buyer, but it benefits the application buyer's boss, and it probably benefits the whole community. Because the boss is going to be talking about, now we have this, this accreditation, and this accreditation makes us more likely to help with business development for the region. And so everybody's winning because you've identified a more complete problem instead of a more narrow problem. Is that true?
Correct. So what we are reaching, my whole mindset has been, and I think I dream about this bell curve now. I've actually called it the hat because it's better than calling it a bell curve. So my hat actually is how to, we had a meeting day before yesterday, Rick, in the office, where an ex-colleague of Wayne and mine joined us and came up with a proposal. And as he was talking, and we sat there for 3 hours, all I was doing was taking everything he said and the way he responded, and I put it into this curve. And then I turned around and told him, I just asked him one question. So he's promoting selling equipment. I said, are you in the business to lease? And he wouldn't answer me that question. He still hasn't answered me after 3 hours. He's not sure that he wants to lease. But our customer is like, so an airport up north is going to have a problem, and he wants to get the cheapest thing because he doesn't have money. 20 airports all want the cheap item. If I can buy one thing that can make it cheaper for all of them by leasing it out to them and stretching it, I've solved his problem. I've solved the seller's problem. And in between, we as the brokers, we have solved our problem too.
Amen.
That's all that you're looking for.
Amen. And, a couple of things that are really important in that conversation, just in a generic sense. One is recognizing that solving the problem isn't only about either the engineering or the technology. It's about how do we make it easy for this economic buyer to consume this solution to this problem. And part of that is financing, or contracting, or who's doing the work. There's a lot of ways to think about this, and you're helping to remove obstacles for that economic buyer to say yes. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's really powerful. The other thing is, as a rule of thumb, always lead with, I call it concept, but it's really always lead with the problem you're solving first. And if these 5 mindsets, and typically the economic buyer will say, people, we don't have a choice. We have to solve this problem. And now you got to help me solve it, people, but I have to solve this problem or I'm going to lose my job. And so when you lead with that problem, now you have universal commitment to the fact the problem must be solved. And so once you have everybody, and that's why anytime I can get all 5 of these in the room, I want them in the room, because I want, and I don't care if it's like we're doing right now, Zoom, but if I can get all 5 of these mindsets in the same conversation, and the economic buyer says, we don't have a choice but to solve this problem. It's too expensive, there's too much risk, whatever the issue is, we have to solve this. Now the issue isn't, are we going to solve it? It's how are we going to solve it? Which is where, as you were talking about leasing, or we're talking about, any other options, we become the facilitator, and everybody has heard the same mission. So that if I talk to each of these people individually, they won't agree on the mission. But if I talk to them together, I will first guarantee you they have never been in the room together to talk about this mission. So when you bring it up, by default, you become the leader because you're the only one with a common language, a common approach. You've thought it through completely, and you're going to let them help you define the final scope of work that they can all salute.
Mm-hmm.
And so recognizing that these 5 mindsets exist, and they might exist in 6.4 people or 20 people in big airports, that's even more important because you got to get them to conceptually agree they're going to solve the problem. And the more you talk to them, the more they'll recognize you already have a solution. And as long as you don't force it on them, as long as you let them decide they like it, they get to contribute, participate, engage, help you define. That's why the language of helping clarify the problem, helping to solidify choices, help to figure out the metrics. When you got these 5 different mindsets, they're willing to do those things. And you're going to be the leader. Paula, is that making sense?
Yes, it's making sense to me. So we have to pretty much address to all the 5 mindsets and then making sure that through your offer, you find a solution that everybody wins on that.
Yes, and you really become the teacher. And, for your part of the business in particular, I can imagine that many people don't think about kind of the space part of this. Is that true?
Yeah, like I'm doing like the Abbotsford doing the little small model, and it's hard. Like Sanjay told me to use the same space and then add different numbers of sitting there. And as I'm doing, I say, okay, I fit everyone. And then I start thinking, oh, but is there space for example, someone with a wheelchair to right there? So I have to rearrange everything again. Oh, but if someone like, they need a space like for if they like having a snack or something. So I have to rearrange everything. And yeah.
Yeah, and small children and, yeah.
Yeah.
And so your ability to help these 5 mindsets understand the power of what you bring to the table so that they can understand that space is a way to create great value for the traveler, great value for the airlines, great value for, material handling, whatever those things are. They aren't thinking about that. So that's one of those places where that thought leadership piece where, and you don't tell them they should think about it, you help them understand that, a typical way to language it would be, other airports have found that space design contributes to greater prosperity, less cost, better environmental, whatever it is that applies. And you want, that's doing this. When you talk to them about other airlines have found space management makes a huge difference in the satisfaction of the traveler, that's in effect one of these awe, wow, shocked, intimidated kind of messages. So once they hear you say that, the next thing they do is they put themselves in the picture. They go, really? How would that apply here? And then you go into, it would apply, here's how you would do it if you're worried about wheelchairs. Here's how you do it if you're worried about children. Here's how you do it if, you're worried about, food or whatever it is you're going to talk about. You can move them through that by presenting ideas, presenting concepts that apply to them and that they need to be considering, but they probably haven't.
Mhm.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So rather than tell them, help them arrive at the idea, because what do you think? If it's their idea, will they like it better than if it's yours?
Absolutely.
So that's the skill that now we get to start to develop. So I want to give you a new way to think about, and Sanjay, you are so good at being my straight man, so thank you for that. You were talking about the gentleman in the leasing situation.
Hmm.
As Avcon goes forward, you're selling 3, 2, 1 are your primary targets, okay? And obviously you can sell direct. That's what you're doing now. You guys pull out your Rolodex, you go to a conference, you do whatever you need to do, and you're selling direct. And of course, in a lot of ways, that's the best place for you because you know your offer's better than anybody else, and that fits. But it doesn't scale well, okay? And partially it doesn't scale because, if we send Paula to a conference and then she has to come back and do design, she's not finding another new client while she's designing. And then if you get the deal, then she's deploying. And so we need to figure out if there are other ways for us to go to market that are more leveraged and can allow us to do the things we know we have to do. We do have to do the final statements of work. We've got to be responsible for our own contract, and we got to be responsible for delivery. So we know we got to do those things. So can we get help someplace, okay? So these are the general conditions where other people can help you sell. Now, what a trusted advisor is a trusted advisor is somebody who is already trusted by the customer you want. So if your customer is an airport, who is it that's already trusted by the airport and would like to have you in there helping the airport? So, and I'm going to make this up because I don't know if it's true or not, but when you talk about an equipment manufacturer, if the equipment manufacturer manufactures de-icing equipment and they know the way you guys approach de-icing, that it would be design consistent with their product. So if they were to go to the airports and say, hey, you've owned our equipment for a long time, we know you're going to go do a new design and you're going to come up with a new way to approach this, we'd suggest you call Avcon. So that they become a referral source for you, not because they want to help you, but because they believe you will help them. Okay? Sometimes it's other consultants who do tangential work to yours, and they know if you're in there, they look better than if somebody else comes in there or one of their competitors comes in there. So if you can find people who have their own selfish reasons to bring you to the table, try and figure out how to do that. Are there people out there that fit that description for you?
Oh, lots.
And so, you can't probably manage lots, but find a few, 2, 3, 4, and create a relationship and start it with sharing the problems you're solving, sharing, the specifics of your offer, share the language you're using. The easier you can make it for them to refer you, the more they will. If they have to remember a lot of words or they have to, be as good as you are at presenting your product, they won't. but make it easy. And that's why you guys did a great job on answering your 5 questions, the brand promise and the problem you solved. That's where the power of this comes from. And when you talk to these trusted advisors, you're telling them, here's our brand promise, here's the problem, here's the niche that we can dominate, and this is what our ideal buyer looks like. That's what they need for the referral. And you guys got that down to, you know, 100 words or, you know, some small thing. So now they can refer to you. And so even if they only get you 1 or 2 a year, it's 1 or 2 you don't have to find.
Exactly.
So this is one of those points we're going to talk in a few minutes about, points of leverage. This is a great idea. This is a great example of a point of leverage. And they're doing it for their reasons. They're referring you in because they believe after you do the proposal or you do the consulting, their de-icing system is going to be perfect because, you know, they know your mindset has the same concepts they do. So they'll want to do it for their reasons. Okay. Other types of channels are typically like manufacturers' reps or those types of things. I don't expect that's a good partner for you. Do you guys think it is or isn't?
So in my previous life, there was a product that was created in the UK, and it is now in demand by most airlines, and they're using it. They're switching from leather to e-leather. And one of the things that I tried to do was, which got shot down, was that this company in the UK had 500 salespeople selling e-leather to airlines. Well, what we would do is we would say, we want you to not only sell them the product, and this is what came up in the video yesterday, and I was laughing, that we also want to do the after sales product. So go to this other company that will clean these products for you. And of course, it wasn't accepted, but there are other channels that we can use with people in what we are defining. So one of them is being this gentleman who came in day before yesterday. We can get his equipment to be sold because he gives a much better aftermarket product than others do.
And Sanjay, that's a perfect concept piece. You're looking for those partners who they will be more successful because they can link you to their work.
Yeah.
And so anytime you can find them, it helps them sell more, shorten their sales cycle, and maybe get a little bit extra margin because that next step is already taken care of. And from your standpoint, it may get as simple as, you got an email and they want you to show up and give them a proposal. So look for that because that's where leverage comes from. And that's also why the clarity of those 5 questions, your offer, and your message, without that, these other people really can't help you.
Correct.
And so that's why this gets so important. Okay, then the 4th one is, and I really don't know the answer to this, so I want to ask, what are you doing today around the web? How active are you guys in social or digital or website or blogs or videos? What are you doing today?
We're rewriting our whole website. So for now, we use more the LinkedIn. And every week, we try to be active by posting articles, each one of us, and then we share and like. And for now, that's what we're doing.
And I see a ton of that with you guys. You're one of my most active clients, and yet you're one of the smaller. I mean, I see your stuff on LinkedIn constantly, and it's very professional. So that's good. What else? Anything else right now?
I don't think
I'm in the process of making videos.
Okay, good. Because here's where I want to jump to this. when you think about the web, the messages you want to deliver to these different mindsets, to the extent that those messages exist in videos, in blog posts, in white papers, in presentations you've made to a professional association, that makes it so much easier for you to communicate to these 5 mindsets. Because when you have delivered, when you've written a white paper, you've done a video, you've been at a conference, and you have explained, trained, educated, challenged people on the problem you solved, so that you're communicating this value you bring that other people aren't even thinking about. When you've already done that, people don't get to consider it defensive. But if you're in a sales situation and somebody asks you a question and you give them an answer to their direct, almost challenging question, sometimes they think you're making it up. You know, believe it or not, people don't trust those who are selling to them. So when you have to answer it in response to a challenge, the credibility is marginal. Okay, they expect you to come back with a politically correct answer. But if that same politically correct answer is on a blog you wrote 6 months ago, or in a video, or in a white paper you did for the conference, or in your speech to the conference, now all of a sudden the credibility doubles or triples. So, and what happens when that credibility doubles or triples, or you can send, you know, the example of Sanjay, of, you know, the person you were talking to, his KPI didn't require this, but his boss does. What's the power if you can send a URL with a video where you're talking about that, and they can just forward it to their boss? What's it do for you?
Automatic promotion with least amount of effort.
And it reduces time.
Yeah.
And so this is when we talk about leverage, these are examples of where leverage comes from, where you've created these videos, and now you can, and I don't care if they're videos, they're text, they're white papers, they're there and they're already demonstrated, and to the point that you have posted them publicly. Now the world gives them more credence than if you just say it in a locked conference room. Mm-hmm. So you get power, you get, and if you have something you've written for a conference or a paper you've delivered at a professional association, and the professional associations publish it on their website, excuse me, now your power is way stronger. And so every time you do something like that, it shortens the sales cycle and it increases your margin because you're safer than the other guys. Mm-hmm. So, and that's, you know, that's part of the reason I'm sure Wayne has you in this certification. The certification will give you power. And, you know, as you continue, Paul, in your area, I know there's lots of different certifications in the architectural space. And so the more of those you have, the more you shorten the sales cycle, the more people are confident. You're lessening the risk. And, you know, once you get 1 or 2 of these people in this group who are on your side, then it's harder for their peers to pick on you. You know, so you want to do things that get, you know, 1 or 2 of these people say, hey, I heard their conference talk. It was great. It was well received. The people there thought it was terrific. Well, all of a sudden you're a safer decision than you would have been if that didn't exist. So some of these things look small, but they're not. They're a big deal. So anything you can do to help other people either refer you or support you in the process will shorten the flow, and it also increases the volume of the flow. And it probably increases your margin or the size of the deal or how many opportunities people will give you. So this stuff in today's world's a big deal. So is that all making sense?
It does. It does.
Paula, any thoughts on any of this?
No, it's all making sense to me here.
Okay, good. Now, I want to continue the bell curve, but I want to talk about offers for a minute. Because offers are really what people write you a check for. You know, they really contract with you because you made an offer. And when we think the culmination of the offer is when the contract gets signed. I mean, we're building the specificity of the offer to the customer from the first time they look at your website to the first conversation to the joint statement of work, and then you end up with a contract. You're continually refining and clarifying and establishing the value for which that person's going to sign the contract. Okay? So one of the things, and I think, how many offers does Avcom have today?
Offers out in the market? No, we have one joint statement of work and 0 offers.
Okay. You know, and I know, Paula, in your homework, which we'll look at in a while, you mentioned, let's see, space, de-icing,
The
security.
Safety audit and ground handling services.
Right. So in general, I would expect over time, you'll have an offer in each of those areas or offers that go across those areas. Do we know which is more likely?
Probably we're gonna, at least to start, we're gonna have like offers for each area, and probably some what we want is the offers also across, like relating more than one of these areas.
Okay, Sanjay, does that make sense?
Yeah, so to answer your question, I would say that actually I have to correct myself from before. We've got 2 offers and 1 joint statement of work that we're already working on. I think that what's happening or what's going to happen with us in the next 3 months is we are going to concentrate on one approach is that we're going to give the de-icing offers. So we'll see far more de-icing offers going out because this is the time that it will start for the next season. And with these offers, there's going to be an attached offer of space management and ground services and safety. So even though they are not the focus, they could. So that's where that slide of that administrative buyer comes in. That guy is now saying, oh, this is solving 2 different problems for me. I was only looking for 1. So that's what our approach is going to be in the next few months.
Well, and if you, I mean, that is so consistent with that video you watched yesterday, which says, you know, what happens next? You know, and that was really part of what the video was saying is, okay, you're going to sell me this product today, but tell me what's, you know, what's the follow-on to this?
No, I'm going a step ahead. What I'm saying is from yesterday's video, we are going to give you the after-sale product, but more importantly, so if you buy a high-end die from me, I will maintain it for you for the next 5 years. But along with that, we are going to help you get a bank loan. We are going to help you put the car in a garage while you're traveling. So that's sort of a concept. So even though our offer is going to be focused on one aspect that the buyer really wants, we are throwing in these caveats that say, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe you're talking to somebody at the water cooler, you're going to need this, and think of us.
Yep. And I want to jump back because I like where you're going with this. To me, you're describing these additional value opportunities beyond the buyer's standard specification requirement.
Correct.
And both for the short term, which normally is the ones at the top, but you're also then defining additional value opportunities for the long term. And that's really a single offer with multiple components or elements or arms or whatever you want to call it. And it all builds from the initial problem that the buyer recognized. And what you are doing as a team is helping the buyer recognize that problem is just the foundation level. There are other levels that need to be addressed and can be addressed simply from that foundation. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And so that's excellent. And you're making it easy for that buyer to partner with you over the long term because you're not proposing a transaction. You're really proposing a business problem to be solved that is a continuous improvement process. And,
Absolutely.
and anybody today should recognize that the environment's changing, particularly in the airline industry, so fast that they need people who are helping them not have negative future surprises.
Correct.
Okay. So one of the things about offers is, and I know we've talked about this before, but offers should be intentional, and they should be, if the heart represents, kind of the core of your company's existence, that you're solving problems most people haven't really given a lot of thought to. You're not necessarily you may be occasionally over in one, but for the most part, you're really helping people apply technology and process and workflow to make their businesses much more prosperous. And so that typically is a two transaction instead of creating everything technology-wise nobody ever heard of. You're pulling together a variety of things to help your customers prosper today and be safer in the future. Is that pretty much true? So if that's the case, the offers you have, you want them one track right or left of that approach, all right? And be careful that they don't go too far afield and that you don't have too many of them. What's the risk of too many?
You're not focused in looking after the people who are on quadrant 2, because now your resources and time is stretched into 4 and 5.
Exactly. And even if we moved these over here, your comment about resource is dead nuts on. Every offer, if you think about the offer needs to effectively communicate to, all 5 of these people, and you need to have some things online and some video and whatever it is, all of a sudden the maintenance of the offer, when you get too many of them, is stretching resources so thin. And the power of the offer is when somebody gives you money for it. Creating it and maintaining it is not profitable if nobody's giving you money for it, okay?
Right.
So the decisions you have to make are how many can we actually manage? And everything I've heard from you two is spot on in that your offers are tangential or integrated with each other, so that you're not doing a new separate offer over here that's not related to these over here. Because when they're integrated or tangential, there's at least 30, 40, 50% that's already in place. You're just adding something to it. And the beauty of adding to it is that's also what keeps moving your offers from here back to here. It's when you add more to it, or truthfully, whoops, you link two of these together. That's there's big power in linking two of them together.
Mhm.
And so that's a very effective and efficient and highly financially leveraged way to do this, is to continually expand on the ones you have, add more value, link training and consulting, link product support and consulting, link those kinds of things together all in a consistent way. You're making it easier for the buyer to buy. You're making it safer for the buyer to buy. You're probably actually decreasing their total cost, which is what you want to do. You don't want to be the low price, but from their standpoint, you want to continue to decrease their cost and increase their top side. And when you combine some of these, you're creating a better airport or a better airline instead of just fulfilling a technical requirement. So thinking about offer, I call this offer management, being very conscious and not letting offers just spring up because a customer said, and I think that's in one of your homeworks, and I congratulate you for it. Just because somebody says, I want you to do this, we're just not going to say yes to those things because it's not intentional. It's not well thought out. It may not even be strategically aligned to the other things you're doing. So managing your offers has huge financial impact one way or the other. And when you have these partners that might make referrals to you, if they see you helter-skelter bringing offers to the market, they will quickly abandon referrals to you because they don't know what you're doing. Consistency is something they will like, and will your customers will as well. So I wanted to make sure we gave you a bigger bell curve picture, and this is one of those places where there's a lot of opportunity to get leverage, financial leverage, by applying the disciplines in this space. We good in this space? We got questions or anything on the? Okay, we're going to go into a completely new area here in a minute. So do we want to take 10 minutes right now, and then we'll come back and start a new area, which will go for quite a while?
Okay, good. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break.
Okay.
Okay.
Come back when you can.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I went to make a fresh pot of coffee.
Well, that's good. You'll be awake for the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, I promised we'd spend some time on deeper financials this time. So I'm going to tell a story that is a real story. Johnson & Johnson was our client for about 7 years. And they were one of the best examples of the complexity around the cost of chaos in the production of revenue. So we're going to kind of tell their story and give you an idea of what what we taught them and what they taught us. Because there's some really clear, because there's such a huge organization, there's really clear metrics in this. And they brought us in to determine if a new product they were launching was going to meet or exceed the promises they'd made to the Johnson & Johnson Board of Directors. And so we started with a study we've done a number of times before, which was really to understand how the sales team worked and what their work habits were and so on and so forth. And here's what we learned. We learned that the first question we asked Johnson & Johnson was, we said, okay, tell us, what's your sales team's mission? What do you want them to do? And they said, of course, we want them to sell. And we said, okay, do you know what your cost per sales hour is? And they said, we never even heard of that term. And so you think about an organization as historic and as successful as they've been, they know how to cost. If they were creating a new product, we were working with a group selling sutures. They could do the price of the suture out 4 digits to the right of the decimal. They could measure everything except the process of selling. So here's what we did. We said, okay, if you're trying to attain $1 million in quota for a salesperson, let's understand this process. And so what's the base that you have to pay somebody to get them to take the job? And they said, okay, the base is at $75,000. If they hit when they hit their quota, they get an extra 50% of base bonus. And if we take a look at all the travel and the support and the training and fringe benefits, that ends up being about half of their base as well. So for Johnson & Johnson to expand their sales by hiring more salespeople, every salesperson at quota cost them $150,000 a year. That's 15% of the $1 million quota that they're supposed to attain. So then the second question we asked them was, in order to determine the cost per sales hour, you have to tell me how many hours in a week they actually sell. Now, we've done this study a number of times before, and in Johnson & Johnson's case, when we studied them the first time, they actually sold 4 hours in a week. Now, for a Johnson & Johnson salesperson, they worked 60. They virtually worked 7 days a week. They even had team calls on Sunday. And so when you follow that logic, and the interesting thing, when we came back to Johnson & Johnson and said, you guys work 4 hours, they were appalled. Now, the other people we'd studied only sold an hour. In multi-billion-dollar corporations, the average sales time almost universally was 47 minutes a week. Now, that required that we have a definition of selling. And I think we've talked about this before. The definition of selling is moving a deal forward. Cold calling, networking, prospecting are not sales. That's marketing. And so for Johnson & Johnson, they were 4 times better than anybody else we'd ever studied. Now, what that meant was their cost of sales per hour at 4 hours was $781 an hour. And the normal multi-billion-dollar company, their cost per sales hour was $3,125 per hour. Now, when you see that, the scary part of this is that in order to hit the $1 million quota, Johnson & Johnson had to sell $5,208 per hour, and the normal multi-billion-dollar sales team had to sell almost $21,000 an hour. Every hour they're selling. How likely do those things seem?
I don't think it's possible.
Right. I don't think it's possible either. It takes good luck. I mean, you just have to find somebody who has a need to buy a whole bunch of stuff and it has nothing to do with you, and you're just there taking the order.
Yeah.
So the good news was that appalled Johnson & Johnson. And so they asked us to come back 2 years later. And when we came back 2 years later, they were not selling 4 hours anymore. They were selling 10. And instead of working 60, they only worked 50. Okay? So now look at what happens. Their cost per sales hour is now $312 an hour compared to the other multi-billion-dollar guys who are still $3,100 an hour. And the Johnson & Johnson salesperson now only has to sell $2,000 an hour. Now, this is the compelling part of this. If you wanted 40 hours of selling, because if I only have one salesperson, I'm only getting 10 hours of selling per week. But if I really need 40 hours of selling in a week in order to scale or to hit my number or to hit my quota, if I really need that, now my cost per month is $52,500 to get a full 40 hours of selling. And if I'm only selling at 1 hour a month to get 40 hours of selling, I got to spend $500,000 a month to get 40 hours of selling. So I'm going to tell you the rest of the story now, because the challenge to get to 10 hours or get from 1 hour to 10 hours isn't as simple as it sounds. So when we did the first study with Johnson & Johnson, and we found they were only selling 4, that wasn't the only reason they were going to miss their number that year. The other thing we found was they would go into a big hospital program, a big hospital, a big insurance program, and they would sell them this new product. And that meant that the salesperson got the order was booked into the system, and the salesperson went to the next account. But the hospital didn't order anything. No new product. Just that first fill the inventory order was all that happened. And so the salespeople went back, and what they found out was the new product sat in the inventory closet. And they realized that the new product sat on one side, the old product sat on the other side, and only the old product was being taken out of the inventory closet. So the salespeople, wanting the commission, went to the nurses and said, why don't you take the new product out of the closet? And the nurses said, we can't. We can't take anything out of that closet till we're trained on it. Ah, okay. Salespeople came in, trained the nursing staff. Still no orders. Salespeople come back again. Nurses, you're not taking it out of the closet. We can't take it out of the closet. The doctors won't use it. Why won't the doctors use it? The doctors won't use anything they're not trained on. Oh, got it. Came in, they trained the doctors. Still no orders. They came back and said, nurses, why aren't you taking it out of the closet? We can't. Our policy says first use all the old product in the closet, and then use the new. And what the salespeople realized was every time the nurses took an old product out, procurement put another old product in to replace the one that had been taken out. So there was still no orders on the new product. So finally, sales comes back a third time, takes all the old product out, walks down to procurement, writes them a receipt for returning the old product, and then there's only new product in the closet. And so then the process went forward. So now let's look at the big picture of what's going on. We certainly have an idea that somehow Johnson & Johnson got their people from working 60 and selling 4 to working 50 and selling 10. So what do we think the financial implications were from just that change?
Increased revenue growth and profitability.
Way up, way up. What else? As you mentioned profitability, that's true. What drove the profitability? In addition to the top line. Top line went up, yes, absolutely. But it also increased the bottom line beyond the margin. So what else happened?
They understood what the real problem was and how they were going to, next time, to approach it in a better way.
That's absolutely true. And the other part of it was in their offer to the hospital system got better, because it wasn't, I'm just going to sell you a product. We're going to come in and proactively train the nurses, proactively train the doctors, and we're going to help you manage your inventory closet so that you don't have to worry about it, hospital. We'll take care of all that for you. So their offer actually got better. So that's all true. What else happened?
I think they started utilizing their time far better. So, no, let me say it this way. They may have increased their selling hours to 10, but so if in 1 hour they were selling 10 widgets, now in 10 hours they're selling 100,000 widgets. They're selling more widgets in that even the proportion is higher.
That's also true, because They eliminate all the inventory problems so that the flow through is better. And you're also right. One of the ways they did that was if I were going to call on doctors, which is what they did, I would go into my appointment at 9 a.m. and I'd walk in the office and the nurse would say, "I'm sorry, the doctor's in surgery. He can't see you today." So then I'd look at my calendar and say, "Oh, okay, my next appointment's in an hour and I'll just go sit in the cafeteria and wait till that's up." Well, one of the things they did, and this was quite a while ago, is they gave them a little handheld computer. It was before iPhones. And now when I couldn't see Dr. Jones on floor 5 of this hospital, my little computer told me there's 5 other doctors on this floor that are part of my target list. So what do you think I did next?
Yeah, found the next available guy.
Just walk down the hall. Who's available to see me? Absolutely. So now let's think about if I'm the salesperson for Johnson & Johnson, who used to work 60, I now work 50. I used to sell 10 or 4, now I sell 10, so I'm making a lot more money. What's going on in my world?
I am achieving better results with less effort.
And so what's my turnover rate likely to be?
Very low. I'm making far more product available in the market. So less fish to compete with.
And so I'm making a lot more money, working a lot less hard. I'm sure not leaving to go work for my competitor. And so now I'm Johnson & Johnson. My sales team turnover just got cut 80%. What are the other financial impacts to my sales team turnover dropping 80%?
The fringe support and training dropped from 50% to, I'm guessing, 35.
Absolutely. The onboarding, the recruiting, the interviewing, all those things the cost just disappeared. And who do you think applied to work for that team at Johnson & Johnson?
I was going to say all the lazy people, but I'm going to say the best people.
That was exactly what happened. The best in the industry said, I want to work there. I want to sell a whole lot more and work a whole lot less. But that is kind of the lazy part of it too. So when you think about these kinds of situations, there's all these flow considerations, because one of the issues on empty salespeople, when somebody leaves, what's the impact on the pipeline for that territory?
Suffers.
Absolutely. So one of the upsides was when I don't have turnover anymore, I don't have this blank period where my territory is not being worked at the correct level. So as soon as I cut that down, I also maintain a flow that I wasn't maintaining before. So my bottom line is going up all the time because just nobody's subtracting from it anymore. So my time to hire drops, my cost to hire drops, my time to onboard just starts to disappear. My resources to help with onboarding, because sales leaders have to train the new people that they're onboarding. So you're taking the sales leaders out of putting together big deals and you're making them kind of babysit new people. All of these changes start to happen just because the sales team is now more efficient, they're making more money, they like their jobs better, and they're selling a whole lot more. Now, the impacts for a marketing organization when this kind of stuff happens is they have to deal with continually, and in the Johnson & Johnson case, by the handheld, they already knew who their customers were. So marketing didn't have any new cost on this. They already knew who those people were. And so time to get to the suspect went down. Time to convert them went down. All of these kinds of things started to change. So when you start to look at the concept of the cost per chaos, and just based on the sales hour alone, you're, in Johnson & Johnson's case, they were netting 15% just on that alone. So think about now when we know the price per sales hour, and we know how expensive selling is, and probably enterprise salespeople can't ever get past 20 hours of selling. There's just paperwork, there's all kinds of stuff that gets in their way. So what does that tell us that we have to do about marketing to make sales more efficient?
Run that by me again. I think I missed the question.
Okay, so if we know that sales has a capacity of maybe selling 15 to 20 hours maximum, and we know that sales cost per hour is in the 1 to 2,000 range, if we're highly effective, what can we do on the marketing side to make selling more efficient? Because sales is very expensive, very, very expensive. So if we can use marketing effort to scale selling, what's that impact?
So basically, what I would think of is, well, the first approach I would take is increase manufacturing. So, I've got more products to sell. So I can better utilize my salespeople, but that's a very, discussable item. But the second thing would be that what I'm doing is I am now prioritizing what my salespeople are selling. So what I'm doing is I'm taking over the gold part of the work and making it more effective so that sales can only concentrate on the blue part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the interesting thing, the reason we do it, and thank you for doing the colors, is when we say sales or marketing as terms, they're fairly loaded. And we all have an opinion on what those are. And we probably don't even have the same opinion, but we all have an opinion. And when we think about how do we get the gold function to support blue, I can get them to support it by, if we remember the correct metrics for gold are, can we get the right number of the right type of leads at the right time to sales, so that we can then measure sales as to how long does it take, percentage of wins, gross sales and margins, and so on and so forth. So if we can get gold to support those metrics, then to your point, we can focus sales on the ideal product mix, the ideal offer mix, the ideal customers. And each of these groups get to continuously improve what they do. So if I'm saying, in each marketing's customer, gold's customer is blue, blue's customer is red, and red is the single most powerful way to make gold more effective. Because the unfair advantage that gold has is the great work that red has done. When red has created customers that love us and refer people to us and become long-term partners, that makes gold's work way easier. So each of these, their customer is the following color. Does that make sense?
This is my aha moment. I understand the previous slide now. We talked about it a few weeks ago, but went above my head. Remember I was talking about connecting the dots?
Yep.
Connects now.
Yep. And the other thing that happens is as you understand the selling, the revenue roadmap, the material that Gold uses to get people to investigate us and get people to say, wow, you're doing something cool, I want to learn more, is the same material that you're going to use
To create the offer and the messaging.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the material that got one person to come in and look may be intimate in getting any one of these buyer groups to say, oh my gosh, that's cool. Or it goes from a way to get people to raise their hand to a proof.
Mm-hmm.
And that really just depends on where you are in the process. So one of the terms that we've used repeatedly is, we want to leverage and we want these things to be intentional. So when we're creating messages and offers that get people's attention here in Gold, that same content, maybe with slight additions or changes or whatever, becomes part of the selling process. And instead of the salespeople having to create message proofs, things that because remember what we're trying to do is we're trying to work people through awing them, and that's Gold's supposed to do the awing and exciting. But the confidence and the comfort is the necessity of the sales process. If the sales process can't make those 5 buyer types confident and comfortable, the deal is never going to happen. So marketing is creating content that sales is using to shorten the sales cycle, increase the win rates, and increase the margin, because if people are confident and comfortable, they'll pay more.
Right.
As soon as they're afraid, even if you're the best of the bad choices, they're going to negotiate every penny out they can because they're afraid. So putting all those pieces together in an intentional way is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, and it should be highly reusable. So when I asked earlier about, what you were doing in the web, today the web frequently is our portal to reusable content. Everything we create on the web should end up in some way as reusable content throughout the whole process. Because if you do a great talk at a conference, that might be what launched somebody into wanting to learn more. But when you get into the sales process, if we have a video of that, then that helps solidify the buying team that not only do you understand this, but you're actually asked to go to conferences and speak on this because it's clear you're a thought leader. So you don't want any of these things to be random. You want all of these to be creating a complete picture. And so that's why this is so important to align these things. And, when you look at when we talk about the real cost of chaos, we often talk about it as sales, and that's all true. But all these other things are even bigger when you're all said and done. Because one of the biggest concerns, CEOs drive me crazy because they want to talk about the right people on the bus. And I get it. You want the right people on the bus, but the way you get the right people on the bus is when you have a purpose, a problem you're solving that draws the right people to you because they want to help you solve that problem because they had it, their dad had it, their mother had it in their jobs or their careers or their businesses, and they're passionate about helping you solve it. And so when you make it better for the employees and they become part of this and they're passionate about solving this problem, you end up with the right people on the bus. And when you build a process that doesn't take a Harvard MBA to execute, you can hire good people who are excited and want to solve the problem, and they'll be massively successful because you created, back to our Deming, back in the beginning, we don't have a bad system anymore. Because can you imagine working 60 hours and at the best they were only selling 4 before? Wouldn't that be a frustrating job?
So I have a lot to say about Deming, and I'm trying to read up about him. I think that more importantly than a bad system is bad leaders who create bad systems.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give you an example. I heard this last week and I was surprised. There is a very big bank. In Canada, we've got 5 major banks, and one of these big banks decided that their new, whoever is in charge for sales, was going to come in with a new philosophy that he had applied in his previous sector. And so he was recruited, he came in, he changed the policy, and 85% of the people who were working in the mortgage department left. So 85% new hires were brought in. So the cost of recruitment went up, the cost of HR went up, the cost of onboarding went up, the cost of sales went up, but he was not affected because in his department, he has gotten rid of everybody who was making 100, and he's brought in new people who are making 80.
Yeah.
That's a chaos, but that's a chaos that cannot be seen by people like you and me.
Right.
But it should be seen by the person who is now looking overall and saying, hey, this is what it should be. So coming to part 2 of my discussion over here was Wayne sent out this email with a 2-minute video clip about a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk or something like that. And this guy talks about that he has a chief health officer in his company, which is basically human resources, or chief heart officer, sorry. And we should be doing this and we should be doing this. And I looked at the video, and once I look at a problem, I've made up my mind what I think about it. But I decided to look at it again, and I looked at it again, and I listened to him again, and I said, this man is nothing but a scam artist like those gurus in India. What he is saying applies to a company which has 10 people, 20 people, but not a company that has 2,000 people. But he's trying to sell that this is the thing that is going to make the world work. And I don't know if you've heard of this guy or not, but you should watch his latest talk about how we should be talking to our employees. That's a load of bullshit. But then, so I didn't tell anybody what my thoughts were. I just sent out this teaser of an email. I will reserve my comments for tomorrow. So when tomorrow came and Wayne asked me, so what are your comments? And I said, that's a load of bullshit, because the fact that all 5 of you agree that or at least 4 people agree, and I think Paula, you agree with the video being very nice, is great, but it doesn't solve the problem of the buyer, and we are the buyers. And he has not understood that. He is selling us what he wants to sell. In my books, so after taking your course, Rick, I've started looking at these things in a very different manner. Is if he's not solving my problem and I'm the buyer, I don't have time to waste. I want to be that educated buyer, and I want to be the technical buyer. So don't send me this crap. His credibility is down the tubes. Now, this man might have done wonderful things, but my impression of him is he is a load of the swamis who come in India and say you should be doing this. Like there's this one particular guru, everybody follows him in India, and he talks about this stuff. I only asked him one question. Can you tell me how many promises you made 20 years ago you have fulfilled? So I understand this course is far more deeper and is far more interesting if you spend the time to study it and go into the details. So when I said that I want to take over the training of this thing is I want to take this training program and say, it's not about the word unfair. It's not about the word fair. You can take it in any language, in any context, as long as the intent is understood.
And that alone is one of the great, I hope is a great takeaway from this class is, when we talk about messaging, it's about the concept, the intent, the purpose, and you have to communicate it to people in a way that they relate to it. Because if they don't relate to it, it doesn't matter.
Correct. I mean, this guy's video I saw just turned me off because it was the most perfect thing to say. It's like, when your wife comes out and you're getting out for dinner and she says, how do I look? If you don't say you look stunning, every other, even though it may be right or wrong, but every answer becomes wrong.
Yep.
Because that is the expectation of the buyer.
Yep.
And I have to be able to deliver. And that's what he was doing. He was just delivering a message saying, you're looking stunning, even though in his mind he's saying, oh yeah, you could have worn something better.
Yep. So excellent. Well, send me that. I'd like to look at that. Send me the link.
I'll send you right after this stuff.
You're on one of my hot buttons. I don't want to get going. We don't have time for that. But we get a flavor of the year every year, whether it's Bright People on the Bus or whether it's innovation or whether it's, it really doesn't matter. We get all of these things and everybody tells us, if you just do that, you're going to be okay. And they're just trying to sell us whatever their version of this is. And so don't get me going on that one. I can go for weeks. So this is, I just want to come back to the power of linking this into a single map and making each of these things supportive of the other. And one of the challenges, I've got a client down here right now. They've gotten so good at marketing. I mean, this gold part, they're so good at that. They've totally overwhelmed sales. So what that says to the CEO is, okay, let's take some of this marketing investment and move it over here into sales because our flow is too big in the beginning and we can't move it through the rest of the organization. And when you disappoint people in the gold, then they're not going to say good things about our brand. So measuring the flow becomes extremely important so that, and we're never going to be perfect, but the idea is once gold gets so good, sales is overwhelmed, that's when you hire another really talented salesperson. Most companies today, when they don't have enough flow, they hire another salesperson instead of putting money in marketing to increase the right number of the right type to the right time to sales. So it's managing across these three colors becomes really, really important. And to the extent that the content created in gold is helping blue be more efficient, more effective, have higher margins, and sets the correct expectations for red to deliver, has a huge impact on the overall both velocity and quality of what goes through your system.
Correct.
So, okay, now on a day-to-day basis, here's a tool that is a way to just think about things that show up on a day-to-day basis. We get asked to do trade shows. to do ads, to go do a call. We get asked to do a whole lot of things. And a way to think about these things and determine the value of doing them is to just recognize this kind of simple equation. And net profit is really the result of how well you can execute and how good your brand is. If nobody knows you exist, you can have a marvelous execution process, but if nobody knows you exist, you don't get to do it. And we see this, and your example, the bank is typical. Big companies come in sometimes and buy really great little companies. And what happens is when the big company buys them, the execution of the little company goes to hell. And so you watch the net profit go to hell along with that, because the big company didn't care as much about the execution as the little company did. And so you're going, man, that used to be my favorite place. Now it's terrible. And so we see it happen all the time. So if we can control execution and we can control brand, we can control net profit. Now, in your case, Avcom's case, my guess is your ability to execute right now is quite high because you got a group of really good, talented people, and you're starting to focus as a team. So one of the things probably you've got to spend time and energy on is expanding your brand so that you have people coming to you instead of you having to chase them all down. Is that a true statement?
That is 100% true.
Okay. So from a brand standpoint, brand is the combination of the strategy, the revenue strategy, those 5 questions. Because when you can answer those 5 questions, people have clarity about who you are, where you're going, what kind of business you want to do, the problem and the value of the problem kind of all show up in those 5 questions. Times your alignment to execute it. Because if you don't align your flow, your organization, your people, your message, if those things are not your offers, if those things are not aligned, now nobody believes your strategy. So, and if they don't believe your strategy, the world is so transparent today that they'll just move on to somebody else. So if you want to manage your brand, it's get great clarity as a team on those 5 question answers, and then stick to your true north. Keep that alignment. Keep that common message. Keep those things going the same direction. Because as soon as any of that breaks down, now the brand breaks down, and now your net profit's going to break down because your brand is getting worse instead of better. Okay? Execution is really about the investment of resources with the intent of some leveraged outcome. We should never invest in any kind of resource, time, money, human, whatever kind of intellectual property, whatever those things are, they should be invested with an intent on leverage. Now, what does leverage mean? Leverage means we're either improving gold, so we're increasing the right number of the right type at the right time, or we're increasing the leverage in blue, which means we're better able to handle more deals faster, higher margins, higher close rates, higher top line dollars, or we're able to deliver faster, better, on time, on budget, and we got leverage in that space. Or it could cross 2 or 3 of these. But if you can't tell me where the leverage is likely to show up, intended to show up. You're investing money in this structure to create this leverage that's going to show up someplace here and increase the flow. Why would you do it?
So I think that's something very close to my heart right now because of the situation we are in. Can you explain, so what little bit you know about us, what is our leverage?
Well, let me tell you some things I think I see, and then you guys can tell me if they're real, okay? I think one of the things Wayne's done is I look at structure, because the one thing I can see immediately is your team, okay? So I believe the people that Wayne has brought to the table, absolutely each person has a leverage impact on all three of these things. Particularly, I'm going to guess you and Paul have a Rolodex with people who you know and know you. And so if that's true, then what I believe is, first, there's an unfair advantage. When people know you guys and they know the work you do, you immediately get some kind of unfair advantage over people they don't know. So I believe that your Rolodex and the fact that your work has known value in the industry, I think Wayne has created leverage in the gold. In the blue, I believe the fact that you guys are known and you have experience in delivery execution means that you can do a joint statement of work process the right way, and you're not going to waste a lot of time in it, and you're senior enough that you'll walk away from things that don't fit. The delivery, I don't know much about this, but my sense is all of the team has the ability, once the scope of work is defined, to do a pretty good job on delivery. So my guess is it's a eclectic delivery team, which is consistent with what I think your strategy is. Now, in the case of Paula, for example, she brings a gold advantage that allows us to have a more robust offer because we can make the physical environment, part of that equation. Likewise, I would expect that would help with a credible statement of work that includes the architectural side of the equation. And Paula, I assume you know how to deliver in this space. So those are the first things that come to mind. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. So maybe I should have rephrased that because I'm very familiar with Wayne's way of thinking, so I know how he's getting it done. But what I meant was JetBlue Airlines. They are competing with 100 other airlines that are there. What's their leverage? Leverage comes from what I call, my terminology for that is that it's goodies in your bag. When you go to a birthday party, you come home with some goodies back again as return gifts. So you go with goodies, you come back with goodies. So it's a win-win situation for every kid. So today, kids enjoy going to these parties because they're looking forward to what they're getting. So JetBlue, what is their advantage? Or forget JetBlue. What is Johnson & Johnson's leverage? Or what is Siemens' leverage? You worked with them. Sun Microsystems, what's their leverage? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to understand in my head, what did these companies develop? Because leverage is developed. And how did they go about developing it?
How do they develop it, or how do you support them? Or why do they think your leverage
No, what I'd really like to understand is what is their leverage, and then how did they develop it themselves? Because we are a startup. So because we are a startup, we don't want to go through the whole rigmarole. We want to go through tried and tested methods. So Johnson and Johnson, to sell their brand new product that they created and they brought you in, what was their leverage for that product? How do you identify it? How do you recognize it? And what did they do to make it work? Getting people in together who've got the right frame of mind and the right product and safe product, that's all. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
So if I fly with JetBlue or I fly with American or I fly with Southwest, it's the same. JetBlue has a frequent flyer program and so does American. So, it's not, everybody's got it.
Yes.
So what
Okay.
is that leverage?
Here's the question I'm hearing you ask. If I'm in the right place at the right time and there's a great economy or some other form of bubble going on, all I have to do is have certain minimum standards met. And if I have a frequent flyer program, whatever those minimum standards are, I meet those. I have a certain amount of business because I'm credible, okay? So what I hear you asking is, how do we create the additional value that creates loyalty or partnership or sustained differentiation? Is that the question?
Absolutely. So when we are out of that bubble, when this automatic sale is already happening, that's great. But when we're really out of it, what leverages can we create and how do we create them?
Okay. I just love the question. And I love the question because most people never ask it. And so when the bubble ends, they're sitting there with no answer, and everything that had worked for them is either not working at all or not working nearly as well as it did before somebody pricked the bubble and burst it, okay? This is the time when you get really clear about the answers to those 5 questions, your brand promise and the problem you solve in particular, and I would not get out of my niche. When I'm a small company, I would be so committed, and I am personally committed to my niche, that nobody can say to me when the bubble bursts, oh, I'll give you a specific example. Grand Rapids, Michigan. I don't know if you know much about Grand Rapids, but
I do.
Grand Rapids, if you know it, has maybe more top quality, privately owned corporations than any place else in North America. And they're Dutch. And they live a very conservative, cash is king. Some of them don't even have credit. And they just run phenomenal companies. And they hate people from Detroit showing up when the economy's bad in Detroit, and they just show up to take advantage of Grand Rapids' great economy. And so if my niche was Grand Rapids, I would make sure they knew I loved them in the good economy. I was bringing them value. I was focused on their problems. And so when the economy goes bad, they know I'm somebody they can trust. They know the value I bring to the table. They know the way I operate. And there's just no question about any of those things. And so that's a really fine niche. But I think that's the small company needs to be really clear about that problem, that commitment to those people that have that problem, and they need to become identified with that niche so that everybody in that niche in the bad economy is safer doing business with that company than anybody else. I mean, your advantage today is, while the big company might be a little cheaper, might even have a couple of engineers you don't have, everybody knows that big company will leave them in a heartbeat if there's another better opportunity for those resources. So if I were in your shoes, I'd be, this is where we live. I'm here to solve these problems for you this year. And your story that you gave me earlier, Sanjay, about the additional value pieces that you're bringing, not just for today, but for the next 2 generations, that's a story I'd be telling. That's a value nobody's going to challenge you on.
So is storytelling a leverage or is it a
yes.
brand?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Here's the great question. When you, where to go? There we go. If you don't explain to the customer the difference between their minimum set of requirements, frequently not even based on good knowledge. You know, they go out and they look it up on Google and say, well, that's what somebody else bought. I'm going to look for that too. You're saying to them, and you have to tell a story to say that to them. Hey, I see where you got this, and good job for getting here. Let me ask you a few more questions, because there may be a whole lot more that you could get from this, both for this single transaction and for the future. Are you interested in hearing about that? And then you tell the story, you give an example, you use references, you do whatever it is, because if they don't understand, you know, that video you listen to, if they don't believe you really know them and you can communicate that, I mean, that was the second one in the video, communicate, great communication skills. And then you're really saying, based on that, here's where you can go. And look how much better you'll be when you get there. That's why I don't want anybody to use the word demo. I want a preview. I'm going to preview for you where you're going to be when you follow this path. Because that's all they care about. They only care about them. And so they don't want your demo, they want their preview. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to corner down what leverage is understood by major companies today, the word. Because leverage is a word that's been highly misused and abused along the line. So knowing people, corruption, bribery, it's all leverage.
Yeah.
But what is really leverage in the ideal business world? And I was making notes while you were talking, and it would be the trust, the focus, the advantage, the storytelling for a startup company like us.
And one of the things I think you can say today is that I really like the way you thought about that, because historic leverage could be based on things that were marginally ethical. You know, I'm reading a book on the House of Morgan, which is the Morgan banks and all that. And banking at the turn of the last century bordered on a lot of payola kinds of stuff, you know, kickbacks and so on and so forth. Today, that stuff won't play. I mean, the world's too transparent. And, you know, so this point going forward, it's leverage. And I think two things. One is leverage, and people know whether or not there is whether you use worthy intention, why, purpose, whatever language you use, that the leverage we're talking about is the leverage to help our clients solve a series of problems that make their companies better. Because the belief is, if I can make my client's company continually better, and I think that's the reason we've had some of our clients over 15 years. You know, it's seldom we have a client less than 2 years. Because the only thing I really care about day in, day out is, can I make their world better? And if I do that without any hesitation or without any focus on, can I get an extra nickel here? So it's about, can I continually help you solve your problems so your business is getting better and better? Because what I know after doing this for all these years is you're teaching me to be better. And what you're teaching me, I get to go apply the next time. And I get a new client, or I get a new offer, or I get a new something from what you're teaching me. And if I just let that happen, intentionally let it happen, that I'm not here for the nickel, I'm here for both of us getting better, that's leverage. Did that help?
Yes, yes. I made a number of points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to start applying them to my thought process now when I start looking at different customers.
Excellent. And it's interesting, when you actually say those words to customers, the customers who value those words are the ones that'll be with you for years. You mentioned Sun Microsystems and some of the others, Siemens. My favorite Siemens story was telling the CEO of Siemens Communication that the $250 million they'd invested was never going to come back to them, and quit investing more. And I mean, that was a terrible conversation to have, but it was true. And that was part of the reason we had another 5 years with them. That we were willing to have that conversation and mean it. And it wasn't arbitrary. It was very intentional, very specific, based on, what we believed to be true. And so, and at Sun, the thing that we did for Sun was we brought a common language and common discipline to marketing and sales and product development and engineering, who all were a bunch of really smart people, all trying to do really good work, all speaking different languages. Aside from the fact half of them were all over the world and spoke those different languages, they spoke engineering and finance and marketing and sales. They weren't even if they spoke the same historic language, they weren't speaking the same business language. Our job was to make that all one conversation. That was the leverage we brought. So that's why we're there 15 years.
Correct. Now, how many people work for you in your company, Rick?
Typically between 3 and 10, never more than 10. Now we're 3.
Okay. So it's something similar to us, but we are in our growing pains while you've already achieved adulthood. So
yeah, yes. Biggest we were was when we were literally, if you remember Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, the computer company, we were their sales launch team. When they had a new enterprise product, we would do it.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's a good example of, your question on value is typically big companies, the elephant in the room, almost nobody will talk about. And so we would say to them, look, you got 5,000 salespeople. Of all those 5,000, to go sell something truly new, you have less than 50 who have the skill. And those 50 are also your most successful 50 salespeople in the whole country, or whole world for them. If you pull those 50 out and you put them on enterprise, they're 20% better than the next 50. You just lost 20% gross from pulling those people out and moving them.
Right.
Now, once you move them, they won't move unless you pay them a lot more money. Because where they are now, they're guaranteed to win. I mean, they've been winning for decades. They're going to keep winning. To move them, you got to promise them 2 or 3 times as much money. Now, when they're done with this new product launch, do you think they're going back to where they were before? Not a chance.
Correct.
So you lose them. So if you pull those 50 people out, triple their salary, move them over here, once that becomes a run rate business, you won't pay them 3 times as much. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
So based on that, they paid us a boatload of money. Their fee, they were 50% less than they were paying their own people, and we knew how to do it. That was the biggest we ever worked. But it was a pain in the butt business for me. Managing a bunch of prima donna salespeople is not fun. So, okay.
I think I can fit that category. I think Wayne feels exactly the same.
So the one thing just to think about, and this is, I know you've got copies of this and you will again, but this is a way to think about the transitions for your business. And if you make this a cost of chaos kind of conversation, the level 1 company has got a cost of chaos in the 30% or larger, and it's really a bunch of individual contributors, good people working really hard. But it's the Deming's example of, a bad process kind of place. And so your chaos is high. What you find is it moves up the 5 steps. The strategy gets clearer, the alignment gets intentional, and people are actually executing against a very thematic, habitual kind of business model. Excuse me. Things aren't accidental. Things happen on purpose. And Sanjay, your question about the economy and the leverage when the bubble burst at level 5, those people are really at 4 and 5, both of them almost look for bubbles to burst, because that's when they get their competitors' best employees and they steal their competitors' best customers, because they have the ability, if you're in construction, to bond a deal that somebody else can't bond anymore because the economy's gone south, or they have the cash to forward to the next project. So when you get up to that 4-5 level, and that's another place where even a small company, and actually small companies in some ways are better at the 4-5 level, because they can go do really important, critical survival projects for people, because they still have their team. They have processes that are predictable. And so in 4-5, in our business, the best thing that can happen is the economy to be bad. Because when the economy is bad in our business, people say, okay, we were making money before doing whatever we did. We don't know what it was, but we made money at it. Now the economy's bad. We need you to come in and help us. So for us, we kind of look for bad economies because that's the best thing for us. But this is just a map, and if you care, and Sanjay, if I know you, you probably will, we actually have a spreadsheet that's way big that walks people through this whole thing. So if you ever get to the point you want to deploy this, we have nobody's used it in 10 years, but we have it. That's all the steps to go from 1 to 5.
Okay, I want it. There is nothing that to learn that I would ever say no to.
Okay, well, if I forget to send it to you, remind me, because I have to find it, because nobody ever wants to pay for it. So, but I thought you might, so that's why I mentioned it. Okay, so for going forward, some of the skills, and we talked about skills today, and bias frame of reference is a skill. And it's in every situation, it's that hesitation of a half a second to force yourself to ask the question, what would my buyer think of this? And then answer it. But it's most of the time when we have a situation, whatever it is, we're thinking about what we think about it. So the skill is to take that half second and instead of ask what you think about it, ask what your buyer's going to think about it. Because all of a sudden, first the answers you get are really important answers. Because when you think about what they care about, you already know what you care about. But now you can go, okay, they care about this, I care about these 3 things. Oh, I can align them, or I can make a win for both parties out of them. When we only think about what we think about, then we're pushing it on. Start from their frame of reference. It's a habit and a skill. Buyer's problem you uniquely solve. We certainly, that's one that keep getting better and better and developing. Sanjay, to your question on stories, this is when you're talking about solving these and explaining the value. I was with a client yesterday and he kept telling me, well, I know how to do this for him. I said, you don't know how to do it until you find out they appreciate and value what you want to go do. You may be right, but if they don't understand it, they'll never pay for it. So that's what this skill is about, is helping that buyer appreciate and be compelled by the story you're telling. Because, I know all of you now well enough that none of you are doing anything that's not intended to do great things for your customer. So if it's intended, make sure they understand it. Behavioral outcomes. Too often, we've been trained in our academic careers for the big companies we worked for. They want to measure activities. Activities only matter to the extent they create behavioral outcomes. And Paula, one of the things I believe you bring to this equation is to help people appreciate the behavioral outcomes that will result from different architecture. Humans in the airport will have very different physical, mental reactions to the airport, depending on how it's designed.
Yeah.
So make sure that part of what you're bringing to this is that it's just not a bunch of chairs. It's not about the chairs. The activity, are there enough seats? It's about the whole configuration and the emotions that come from this and the behavioral. Often we don't watch the human we're talking to because frequently they respond physically to words and we miss it. So make sure the behavioral outcomes is measured, because that's really what the measurement's about. Continuous improvement. No matter how good we are today, no matter what value we bring the customer today, and that's, Sanjay, why I love the story you were telling earlier about, you're 2 steps down the road on the thing. The continuous improvement is critical, and it isn't critical that today we know exactly what 2 steps look like. It's that we know that 2 steps are necessary, and as we continuously improve, we'll get there. And then the joint statement of work is a skill. And it's not just an individual skill, it's a team skill. It's how your team interacts with the buyer's team. And you think about those 5 buyer types, and the video said 6.4 humans, but 2 of them are technical and so on and so forth. Just recognize that creating clarification of what we're really trying to do and solidification of how we're going to go do it is really what the scope of work's all about. So that's a skill set that needs to be developed.
Okay, so I just have a quick question on number 3, behavioral outcomes. You said measure behavioral outcomes. How do you measure effectively?
If you think about the roadmap and the gold and the blue and the red, if you remember, the metrics for gold are right number, right type, right time. And so what we're really saying is you have the right number of the right type of persons at the right time who raised their hand and said, I'd like to learn more and I'd like to talk to a salesperson. That's a specific behavioral outcome. Now, to get to that point, there was a series of behavioral outcomes before that. So that some suspect we never heard of out there went to our website and spent a minute and a half there. Okay, that's one behavioral outcome, minute and a half. Another behavioral outcome, they spent 3 minutes, and they went to 2 different locations, and they came back twice this week. Another behavioral outcome. Now they went to a webinar, watched the whole thing, and now, with that set of behavioral outcomes, I'd probably send them an email and say, geez, it looks like you're trying to solve this problem. You want to talk? And then if they raise their hand and say yes, I've now measured a series of behavioral outcomes to get to the point this moves to sales. Does that help?
Yes. So I have to apply my own metrics on behavioral outcomes of everything that we are looking for.
I'm being a fanatic, I would slightly change it to say, you're going to identify the buyer's outcomes that will move them forward through the process to accomplish what they want to accomplish. I'm just flipping the frame of reference.
Yeah, correct.
But yes, that's exactly right. And if, as you get a little older, you realize your successes were always as a result of buyers resonating or accepting, or in some cases, they just don't see they have another choice, but they're making conscious decisions to move forward with you. And so our job is, how can we make it as easy in this transparent world, whether we like that or not, doesn't matter. We got to make it easy for them to say, you're my safest decision if I want to prosper.
Got it.
And if we get there and we can stay there, your success will be unlimited. So, okay. Our job as revenue science professionals is to continually produce more profitable revenue. That depends on us understanding the problem you solve for your buyer, the value created from, this is the hard one for people. This is the hard one. Being clear about the value the buyer gets from solving this problem. In the work you two are going to do, seldom will the buyer understand the value you can bring them until you're deep into communication with them. And
it's going to be a very tough thing, particularly after I heard about a month ago when Trump said, I don't care about my fiscal financial policies because I won't be around to see what happens in the next 20 years. So this will only come to bite the American people 20 years from today.
Yeah, probably will. But this is the hardest one. Those of us who are either good at process or technology or product development, we're sure what we've built is really, really cool and provides a lot of value. The problem is getting the person sitting across the table from us to have at least the same understanding of value we do.
Correct.
And so, this is just kind of an outline, based on, once we get good at that, it's amazing how predictable things become once we start to get good at those things. Because if we get to the point we understand the problem, we understand the value, and the customer understands the value, the outcome's pretty predictable.
Yes.
And if we don't do those things, then the outcome's pretty random. So if I'm giving you coaching at this point, do everything we can to get rid of the myths that we were kind of brought up under. And Paula, you have the advantage of not being brought up under some of these things, but like salespeople's job is to make cold calls, and sales, it's about closing. Get all that stuff off the table. And having a deployable process that makes it easy for your customers to do business with you is so much better than pitching them and trying to talk them into things they don't think they want. Make sure all your team's aligned, secure. We had the leverage conversation, and intentionally think about the leverage you want from whatever investment you're going to make, time, energy, cash, whatever. Be conscious about it, so that, because once you think of the metric for an investment being leveraged, now you can compare a trade show and an ad in a magazine, or hire another salesperson versus a product development person. Because you'll sit there and you'll say, well, here's the leverage from one, here's the leverage from the other. Which one fits our strategy? Okay? and then make sure that, you know, today is on path to tomorrow, because everything's changing so fast that we can't just be satisfied with whatever it is we're doing today.
Oh, absolutely. That is my mantra.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
So I want to go to homework here for a minute, because you both did a really good job. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time, because you did such a good job. I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. Paula, one thing I want to kind of tease you on, if I may. One of the things, the 3 habits you were after,
Yeah.
the first one was buyer's frame of reference.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I look up here in the compelling message, in 3 lines, 2 sentences.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And this is one of those skills to develop, because we're so used to, and I read a lot of history books, and it's interesting when I mentioned I'm reading the House of Morgan, the banking book, and the language for bankers in 1900 or 1920 was all first person.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that was the right language back then. That was the way it was done. It was personal. Today, we're so used to the web and speed and rapid. The reader the reader believes you wrote it, you must believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And secondly, they just want to know what's in it for them. So this is one of the habits for you to work on, is taking the we part or the I parts out of it.
Yeah.
And that was my only coaching comment on this. You've got really good things in here, and I liked your approach to both the things that you're going to do and then the things below the line that you're not going to do. And my suggestion to collectively both of you is make sure that as an organization you end up with a true north, that everybody on the team is looking at the same elements. So that Bellarmine and Paul and everybody else is looking at the same things that you two have got. Let's see, Sanjay's. Sanjay, you're an excellent writer, and you've captured a lot of really powerful stuff in here, and both of you did a really good job on principles, and it's so much more powerful when an organization. I don't care if they only have 3 or there's a company in they're global, but Gore. WF Gore, I don't know if you're familiar with Gore. They make Gore-Tex, so if you're a hiker or an outdoor person, that's a waterproof thing. And
oh yeah.
Well, they have 3 principles. You can do anything you want as long as it doesn't threaten the company's existence. If it's successful, it will be profitable. And I can't remember the third one. But literally, those are their principles. And as an employee, you can hire another employee. And as an employee, you can go make an investment in new tools. You don't have to ask anybody. And Gore has grown from a little bitty family business to a $15 billion global enterprise. So, the principles are powerful. And I know one of Gore's other business principles was no business will have no location will have more than 200 parking spots, and when those are full, we quit hiring people. Because the principle was, I want everybody to know everybody. And if you enjoy the people you work with and you know them personally, you're going to be happier. And so that was one of them. So principles are very important. So I would suggest trying to bring those to other people. Spot on your your above the line and below the line. I like the 3 elements that you've mastered. the better before cheaper, I think you live that one. So I think that's a really great one and compelling offers to buyers. So I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time because these are so good. I don't have anything to say to improve any of them. And so my last, unless you got questions or one.
Number 6.
Okay.
I struggled with that one.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, let me look at Paula's.
It's number 5 in my case.
Okay. Well, to me, Paula, this one's, if you started with that one as a daily measure, I'm not sure how I would tell you to improve that. To have an act, and the only comment, and I believe this is intuitive in what you said, is that your action plan is going to be based on the things that are up above.
Yeah.
That you're going to be above the horizon line on your true north, and that you're going to be consistent with your strategy. And there is nothing definitive about this other than it's going to be different tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've went through Britain, UK leaving the Union, Trump doing all the crazy things he does. We have this incredible, the most recent crashes of the 737s. Our world changes so fast. The important thing is that on a daily basis, we're reassessing the things we're doing, so that if you think about our work as similar to investing in your financial future, the best way to grow is a consistent process over time where you don't do anything really stupid. You don't invest in things that, somebody told you at the bar, this is a really good thing, and you're doing stupid stuff. So I think if you live with that for a while, if you change it, great. And Sanjay, I think these are very, these repeat customers, behavioral outcome, revenue growth, behavioral outcome, new business where buyers seek us out, behavioral outcome. You're measuring behavioral outcomes. And so what you're going to look at is what are the activities that lead to those things happening? And how do I continuously tweak each of the activities? And so when I have an activity that is creating repeat customers, my question is, do I scale it, or do I continually modify it and scale it? And if my new business buyers aren't seeking me out, what do I change for what I'm doing until I get them to seek me out? And then how do I scale it?
Yeah, so my thought process was, I have always believed in that you will spend $3 to get a new customer, but $1 to keep your existing customer. So if I have repeat customers, then my bubble doesn't burst because I'm always within the limitations, but that doesn't mean that there is no ambition. So the ambition comes from how do new businesses come in where I don't spend the money in selling.
Well, and if we got to go back a ways, if we go back to, whoops. Well, we'll just do this one. Where you have the unfair advantage is really where somebody is seeking you out or responding positively to something you've done because they already trust you.
Mm-hmm.
They trust you from a referral. They trust you because, I used to work at Toronto Airport, and I know you guys did some good work there. Now I work at Calgary. You guys look safe to me. I'm in a new job. I need to hire somebody I trust. I'm calling you. Okay, so the repeat and seeking out are much more linked than we think they are normally, particularly in the transparent world today. Somebody's on LinkedIn and they see they're connected to you. How do you know Sanjay? Well, we worked with him at such and such airport. How'd you like it? I loved it. Worked great. Well, now you're going to get a call, and to you, it's a totally random call, and it's not random at all. It's somebody in this today's transparent linked world making a decision. You're safer than anybody else.
Correct.
So I think both your sets of answers are both ideal.
Okay.
Okay. And one more slide for today. And you will be getting, I'm waiting for, as you probably know, there's a certification coin that you're going to get. My 2020 coins were supposed to arrive yesterday, and it's today, and I don't have them. But I will have them the next week or so. So as soon as I get those, your package will come. Please let me know when it gets to you, because sometimes when I send things out of the country, I sent one to a guy in South Africa. It was like 3 months before it got there. So I know Canada's not as bad, but or as good or whatever. But still, just let me know when it gets there. And I will also send you, probably not Monday, but soon after, a link to the online page. And putting your profile in is up to you if you'd like to. I would love to have your profiles on there. I like for people to see, and hopefully for for AvComm, you guys push the concept of prosperity for your clients. So showing the certification and seeing it on somebody else's website, along with a number of other professionals from, all over the world, literally, gives you more credibility, more power, and hopefully, at some point helps you reduce the sales cycle or increase the margin someplace. So please take advantage of that. I would love to hear from you at any time. That's one of the things I like about working with Wayne. I have a number of people I'm real close to that we've been through, and others I don't hear from as much. But Wayne's always really good at giving me very thoughtful input and feedback and suggestions. So please keep in communication. We have had, and it didn't take off like we wanted, a Facebook community, but we're going to go back to that, where we share ideas and we share new things we've read or seen, so that we'll have, I hope, an active community in the next 60 days so that you can participate in that. And then sometime this year, Wayne keeps pushing me on it. We will have a continuing education experience also. So that'll be much more intentional than the Facebook piece.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
So any closing, I'd love to have each of you tell me your primary takeaway from our time together. And then if you have any questions or anything you'd like to know, please put them out.
So for me, in this entire 9 weeks, is I have learned nothing new. But I have learned everything that was taught to me that I had forgotten. So I think what you've really done is you are, and I would call you in the Indian term a guru, is you have rejuvenated those thought processes that you learn in your lifetime, and you go along and then you discard them because you just didn't feel them important enough. And I think you put it into a context which was so clear, like the General Motors story, the Siemens story, the Sun Microsystems story. It gives me a better understanding of how I should be applying it and why I let it off as my failure. So that's my real takeaway from all this. All these things are understandable. We've read them, we've talked about them, we've discussed them, but they have never been more clearer as they've been now.
Great, thank you. And very little of our work is, really truly new. when we start with Dr. Deming, it's one of the first 3 slides, not all this materials in this century even. So, but it doesn't make it any less true. So thank you. Paula.
For me, well, since most of things here were completely new for me because I've never worked with anything like this before. So it did make me think a lot of things that I've never thought before. And yeah, I'm still kind of absorbing everything like that. But yeah, I think I've learned a lot. I really enjoyed.
Well, good. And you're the other side of that coin where, see, you don't have to get old like me in order to know this stuff. We can teach it to you while you're young.
Yeah.
So, well, I thank both of you, and you'll be getting a package as soon as I get the coins. And please, if I can help, let me know.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to bounce off some ideas to you. So for sure.
I will look forward to it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Paula.
Bye.